I've been sharing a lot of information over the last few weeks about habits, how to create habits, what behavior is to begin with using the Fogg Behavior Model. And the question that I've been getting lots of in my DMs is this: how do I break a bad habit? That's the number one question that I've been getting asked is, thank you for telling me how to create new habits, but first of all, I want to break some of the bad habits that I have. And so before I get started on explaining how you break a bad habit, because there is an answer to that, I want to start by explaining a couple of things. So let's go back to the Fogg Behavior Model, because remember I shared with you a few weeks ago that according to BJ Fogg, any behavior can be broken down into three things: motivation, ability, and a prompt. So any behavior. And then remember I explained that a habit is really a subset of behavior. So if the big circle is behavior, inside that circle is a subset, is habits. Habits are the things that have become automated in the way that we do them. They, at some level, have become subconscious. You don't have to think about doing it because it's second nature to you. And so the other thing that I want to explain as well is that in your brain, it doesn't differentiate a good habit from a bad habit. In your brain, a habit is a habit. And remember, a habit is formed when there's some sort of a release of a feel-good factor or some relief, and your brain memorizes that because it's like, that felt good, or that gave me relief. I must remember it for future. And so that's the beginning of how a habit is formed. So if we take that into account, that behavior is motivation, ability, plus prompt, and they all come together perfectly in varying amounts. And so if we take that into account, then you can reverse engineer a bad habit as well. Because if the same principles apply for a good habit, then the same principles apply for a bad habit. So if you have a habit that you're trying to break, if you have a habit that you're trying to change, if you have a habit that you're trying to stop, then you need to look at motivation, ability, and prompt. The other thing that's been really emphasized to me in all of my coach training is that we're very hard on ourselves. So we judge ourselves for the bad habits that we have, and we use it as some sort of a judgment of ourselves and our character, and we almost see it like a character flaw. And yet, for most of the habits that we have that we don't like, those bad habits, think about how they were created. At some point, on some level, it served a purpose. And so how do you start to take apart a bad habit? Well, first of all, that terminology, break a bad habit, we need to throw that out the door, because it's not like a stick or something where you just like crack it and boom, it's done. Think about how long it took for you to ingrain that as a habit. It didn't just happen overnight. You've been doing it and doing it for time. So like with anything else that you've been doing for time, you don't just overnight stop doing it. It's something that, in the words that I've been taught in my coaching, you start to untangle a bad habit. And so it's kind of like I have my iPhone cables here, my earphones. It's like now I figured out a way to stop them tangling. But before I figured out this very simple system of using a little paper clip, I used to always find my headphones tangled in the bottom of my bag. And it was so frustrating that I'd be trying to take them apart. And if you've ever tried to take apart something that is tangled, what's the easiest way to start to do it? You untangle it bit by bit. If you try and yank, it gets even tighter, it knots even tighter. Think about that as the same with your habits. You have to unravel them bit by bit, piece by piece. Otherwise, it just tightens even more. And so if you want to start to change or untangle a habit that you don't like, that you'd prefer not to be doing, you go back to the behavior model. You look at motivation. It's going to be hard for you to reduce the motivation. If it's a habit that you have, odds are motivation is high. That's why you do it. There's a reason that you do it. And so you can't really change that motivation. But what about changing your ability to do it. So making it harder for you to do the thing, right? So for example, I talked about social media. How about you turn your phone on airplane mode? Or when you need to really focus on your work, you completely turn your phone off. That's an easy way for you to get rid of the distraction. You can turn off the notifications so you don't have that bing, 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 and the notification saying that, oh, there's a new message. And then, of course, you're tempted to look at it. So, or you could even nowadays, I know there are apps that you can use that shut you out of your social media accounts for whatever time you specify, maybe during working hours. So make it harder for yourself to do the thing. Another way that you can do it is by looking at things like, can you make it very expensive for yourself to do? Or is it something that you can effectively hide from yourself? Enroll other people in your family and get them to keep the things away from you. So it's really looking at, how can I make it harder for myself to do that habit that I'm trying to get rid of? So that's the A, which is about the ability. And then the P is the prompt. And so that trigger, that cue that says, hey, it's time for you to do this thing. So for example, I just gave some examples of things that you could do with your phone. So you get rid of the notifications so that you're not hearing the dinging constantly. So you're not being reminded, oh, go check your phone. So that in a nutshell, at a very high level, is how you start to untangle a habit. And the other thing too, really important to point out, is a super easy way to start to get rid of the habits that you don't like doing or that you don't want to keep is actually to create good habits. Because think about it this way. For example, if you're someone who loves candy, when you start a workout regime, when you start going to the gym regularly or working out regularly, naturally, you're going to start to want to eat healthier foods. You're going to start to drink more water. You're going to start to feel good about your body. And so you will naturally start to crowd out some of those habits that you were engaging in before you stepped into a healthier lifestyle. So that's actually where you want to start, is start by creating some new habits that are the identity of who you want to be. Don't directly go and attack that bad habit. Create some other habits that are related. And so then that way, those habits start to crowd out the bad habits. And then the other thing too is to find alternatives. So for my potato chip habit, for example, I can look for healthier alternatives than what I was having before. There are some great alternatives that I can look at that still give me that crunch, that salt, and make me feel like, okay, yeah, I had a snack that's not celery sticks. So it's all about you playing around and figuring out what works for you. There is no right and wrong. It really is about try it out, see what works. And ultimately, the most important thing to remember is this: you only change when you feel good about yourself, when the change feels good. And so you will never be able to change any habit or break a habit, untangle a habit from a place of beating yourself up and making yourself feel bad. So find ways that you can feel good in the process of untangling your habits.